Hello and welcome to Riding the Tailwinds Behind the Used Car Market in 2019. This automotive news power training webinar is brought to you by Stockwave. We're delighted you're with us today for this presentation. My name is Philip Nussel. I'm the online editor here at Automotive News in Detroit. Before I introduce our speaker today, I wanted to give you all a few navigation tips. First, we encourage you to ask questions at any time. You just type them into the Q&A box on the left side of the webinar window and then hit submit. I'll steer your questions to our speaker towards the end of the session. To enlarge the slides, just grab the frame with your mouse and pull it larger. To download the slides, click on the handouts icon at the bottom of your console. Today's speaker is Patrick Janes. Patrick is the Business Development Director for Stockwave, and he brings more than 27 years of automotive industry knowledge to Team vAuto. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Patrick to get us started. Patrick, have at it.
Hey, thanks, Phil. So I know that time is money, and I got a lot of car guys and gals on this webinar today. So I'm going to move through what I hope are some good information for you fairly quickly, and give us a little bit of time at the end to have some Q&A. But let me start by saying, members of the automobile industry, the state of the union for the used car business is really strong. And if you don't have a plan to take advantage of this opportunity, I hope after this session, you find the motivation to do so. Projections show that we will see nearly 3 used cars sold for every new vehicle retailed in 2019. But the economy is strong, so why is the industry, if you've heard, projecting the softening of new car sales? Well, in one word, affordability. So new vehicle loan interest rates are up. We all know that. But those rates are up, and the average interest rate is 6.19% APR as those 0% deals start to evaporate. Now, this is compared to an average of 4.99% last year at this time. And the average loan on a new vehicle for January was $31,700. So even though the average loan for a used car is now over $20,000, the monthly payment spread continues to widen. New car versus used car payments, as shown in this chart, offer a serious affordability cap. Nearly $170 a month difference for those buying new versus used vehicles. So I ask, what is your plan to source the inventory you need to capitalize on this used market opportunity? And I want to spend our time together today breaking down what to expect from the big 3 sources that feed nearly 3/4 of your used vehicle inventory. That's trade-ins on new vehicles, street purchases, and auction purchases. We'll also dig a little deeper on the 3rd source, auction purchases. Let's walk through a process, including how to create a well-thought-out stocking strategy, plus take a look at a workflow I stole from an experienced buyer. Then we can consider where technology can best fit and benefit this sourcing process. But first, let's talk about how technology has revolutionized other industry sourcing efforts. Match.com alone claims responsibility for sourcing inventory that resulted in 10 million marriages and 1 million children born from those matches. So do you know what the top 2 search criteria are? Yeah, income and children. How's that for an oxymoron? One online date expert said, if you look at online dating as casting a wide net where you may meet simply a new friend, a business associate, or just maybe your dream date, you're going to enjoy this experience a lot more. This dating set technology has been in place now for over 20 years and contains plenty of buyers, some without a well thought out strategy, like John here, You may think he's casting a wide net, right, looking for those sellers, but I'm thinking his profile might be just a little creepy. Matching buyers and sellers has revolutionized the dating landscape, and technology did that. And you have to admit, this is a great example of how this technology saves users a lot of time and money to meet their ultimate objective. All right, more on that a little bit later. So let's dig into source number one. At the end of 2018, I heard many dealers saying, I'm staying out of the auction. I have plenty of trades to feed my used car inventory. Well, I have a couple concerns with that sentiment. First, a trade-in is like betting on a black 10 on this roulette wheel. There's really no guarantee that we can consistently trade cars that we can turn in an acceptable timeline and make a respectable gross margin. Additionally, you've heard that new vehicle sales are only down just slightly so far this year. But you have to ask about retail sales. No one trades in a car on a fleet sale. Retail sales measure how many customers you can expect to see on your lot this year. And we already see evidence that this source is going to soften, with sales being down 5% in January on the retail side. We're also seeing new vehicle purchases that include a trade are also declining. Now, I think this may be due to social networking. Folks now more than ever before have the ability to alert friends and even acquaintances when they're in the market for another vehicle and plan to unload their current vehicle. So if a new car sales softening is projected, can I prove to you today that trade-ins as a source of used car inventory will really impact your ability to have enough used car inventory this year? I took this a step further and I pulled this data out of vAuto from two large dealer groups after the January close. Notice their trade appraisal opportunities at the curve were off 7 and 13% in January from the average number of appraisals that they performed in the last 2 months of the year. I believe this analysis is proof that relying on trades alone to get your unfair share of the strong used car market is a really risky proposition in 2019. So let's look at source number two, street purchases. A small sliver of the pie, but perhaps there is some upside opportunity here. Now, I could spend this entire webinar on the best practices for maximizing this source, but I want to get to what I think is your largest opportunity if this is an area you want to attempt to grow this year. The answer, in my opinion, is in this article that recently ran on Automotive News. This dealer group has created buying centers, not auction buying centers, but consumer buying centers. As a former performance manager at vAuto, I had many discussions about how to execute on buying cars out of the service drive and off the street. And I found that the dealers that were the best at sourcing cars this way did one simple thing. And many failed to do this. And this article really shares the secret to success. The singular focus of sourcing vehicles from the public is purchasing cars. Keyword, purchasing. So you see, by nature, car dealers are sellers, not buyers, right? So why would we ask someone to sell their car if I couldn't capture another transaction? I think the quote in this article describes it best with this successful dealer group. This creates, that is, when you try to get them to sell their car, this creates a pain point for the consumer when they are approached to replace versus sell. Every successful dealer told me it has to be, we buy your car, you take the money, period. That's how you generate additional street purchases. However, here's my segue to the next inventory source. The dealer in this article goes on to say, I still buy cars at auction as a supplement. As a matter of fact, it was their experience from being in the wholesale market every day buying cars at auction that led them to this consumer buying center idea. If I know what the daily trends are from transacting at the auction, you can put the right money on street buys rather than relying on guidebooks that can lag behind emerging market opportunities. So let's get to source number 3, auction purchases, near and dear to my heart. There was a second part to that year-end sentiment that I heard from dealers. I'm not going to buy at the auction. I will just rely on trades because the prices are through the roof. And last year, yes, they were. But notice the last 3 months on this chart over the red arrow. Finally, we saw the peak. And we are now seeing auction prices trending downward. There's going to be some opportunity. Now, what's causing that? Well, perhaps the fundamental principles of demand and supply. Based on these projections in this chart, there are going to be plenty of vehicles on the wholesale market this year. Many franchises are predicting all-time record levels of off-lease units coming through the auction in 2019, more than ever before, and expected to peak in 2019 and more than actually projected for 2020. Great year to be in the auction. I apologize for that. Now let me start by saying, when we start talking about going to auction, if anyone knows me personally on this webinar, I started with an OEM and then moved into retail and went to the auction only a handful of times. And that was only after my management team convinced me that the guy buying cars for our store didn't know what he was doing. And I think they just resented the fact that he got to wear shorts every day and eat those killer hot dogs from the auction cafeteria. But I found that buying cars at auction was probably one of the most intimidating processes in our industry. And I think most of you would agree if you're half in or half out. And certainly it wasn't a good place for an ex-factory guy to figure it out quickly. I am absolutely amazed at the guys and gals that can do this on a regular basis. I love this quote from the movie Moneyball. This is the best way to express how I felt about buying cars at the auction after several failed attempts. So I felt when I went in the auction and being in lane, it was like throwing darts. And believe me, I personally missed the dartboard in its entirety way too many times in the short period that I tried to buy some cars at auction. And then, you know, every story has a villain. You know this guy, right? He's the one at the sale with the clipboard, never seems to put their hand down on the cars you're bidding on. The guy probably spent hours preparing for what cars he was going to bid on. And who's got the time for that, right? At least that's what I thought. And remember, some of these guys have figured it out how to work smarter, not necessarily harder. They're doing pre-sale works in a very comfortable atmosphere, preparing themselves to go to that auction. So I was a performance manager at vAuto for the past 3+ years. I'm working with many clients, some of which may be on this webinar, but when I first started, I got that race to the bottom comment all the time. So if every dealer is on vAuto and they use the same data, won't we all just price our cars in the dirt and there'll be no profit left? Well, my response to that became, hey, vAuto just gives you the information. It doesn't price the cars for you. It's really about finding the cars you can make money on and cutting bait on those that the market says your chances are slim to make money on. But here's the bottom line, and I can't emphasize this enough. I've seen many dealers that are hugely successful and make outstanding profits using inventory management systems like vAuto, but I saw a lot of dealers using the same system that really struggled. And the difference was very clear. It was discipline. Discipline to work your strategy every day. In the vAuto world, we call it chopping wood. And I found the same discipline has to be applied to your wholesale acquisition strategy, or you're going to get the same mediocre results. So just look at this dealer, for example, on the pricing side. You see the needs attention box where the no price change line says they've got a reminder in there to price their cars every 5 days. This dealer's only got one right now that he hasn't priced in the last 5 days and changed the price on. Now, next to that, I showed you another needs attention box from another dealer that says no price change in 15 days. And you can see the number that they have not addressed yet. So the difference, I tell you, is that discipline. And it's the same discipline you're going to have to apply when you put a workflow in place for the auction. And we'll get into that as I take you through one of the buyers that I stole his work plan from. How's that? So how does this apply to, acquiring vehicles at auction? I mean, I look at this two dealers' trade capture efforts, or we call it look-to-book summaries as we track it in vAuto. So which dealer would you rather be? The dealer on the top or the bottom? Now, the dealer on the bottom could, up their game a little bit here and win more trades. I mean, you look at their look-to-book percentage is only about 30%. We like to see that closer to 50%. But the real message here is, wouldn't you rather have 69 trades on the lot or 38? And I hear this all the time, if you get more at-bats, you can get more hits. And the best buyers that I see in the auction do just that. They get more at-bats, they search and bid on more cars. But the key is, when going back into the auction, particularly if you've taken some hiatus last year because you had all those trades flowing in, is really to proceed with caution. We want to do this smart. You need to put a plan in place to make fewer mistakes. We want to be in a position to buy cars that were at the wrong dealer, in the wrong market, at the wrong time. Those are where the deals are. But they still make sense for your market. And the best dealers we see at auction have a strategy, and they take the emotion completely out of buying the car. The best dealers assemble their sales and market data and come up with their needs as a buyer before they rush out to find the sellers. We want to leverage technology to find the vehicles that match your needs. I can assure you the guy with the clipboard I mentioned earlier is not buying from the gut. They have done their homework, and they've been chopping wood, as I say. So let's walk through a typical planning process and look at a workflow for finding cars. And if you're not using this process today, I hope you pick up a few pieces out of here that you can apply to make your process a little more strategic. So first we have to determine, this is a simple spreadsheet, I'm more than happy to send this out to you afterwards. First we have to determine how many cars do I need. You got to establish a target day supply, and remember, we need to bake in some extra time for these auction units due to transportation. Now this dealer wants to sell 50 cars and would like to end up with 60 on the lot at the end of the month because it's time to ramp up for the selling season, right? We're in the middle of that now. Now, here's the number you have to be honest with yourself about. It's that next number down. How many cars will you trade and keep in a 30-day period? Now, I've kind of wore you out here on this whole trade issue, but this is an important number. You can't wing this number, right? You got to look at your inventory management system, not just go with what you normally trade, because we saw from those earlier dealer groups that the trend is going down. So we got to know what that trend is, and we got to be willing to track this number very carefully and use it to forecast effectively. If you figure this value too high, you're going to fall short on your buying plan, and catching up can be very, very painful. You know what it's like when you're under pressure and you got to go buy a bunch of cars at auction in a short period of time. So why do we want to get this plan down to a number of cars we need to buy each day? Again, remember the last time you got 20 cars in all at once and you watched your reconditioning process seize up. And maybe because you're such a disciplined price changer, you actually lowered prices on cars that were still in process before they were frontline ready or with photos, giving up margin before the car even had a chance. So the key is and have an even flow. And buying cars on a daily basis is going to provide that even flow. So let me strongly emphasize that the best dealers pull data from their inventory management system to track their sales and inventory on hand, to identify holes by segment and retail price band. And this is where the stocking plan really lives. I recommend you take this deeper. So in this particular dealer that I showed earlier, they needed to buy 13 cars per week. What kind of cars do we need specifically for your market to fulfill those 13 cars per week? Now, if you don't have easy access to your sales data in your market, our performance consultants that come with our technology will do this heavy lifting for you. But you got to find this data. And it's not just your sales and inventory situation, it's what the market, what the registration data is telling you, what segments are moving on you. I've seen a lot of shifting going on within segments as we've seen this phenomenon happening in the new car side of the business where everything's moving towards SUVs. We've actually seen some interesting shifting going on towards cars in the used car business just based on affordability. But this is a critical step in targeting the right cars that we're going to go seek out at auction. This is one of my favorite reports that I used to run as a vAuto performance manager. When the dealer and I felt we were, and I apologize, it's a lot going on here. I'm going to blow this up here in a second to show you some points. But I wanted to give you kind of the depth and breadth of this. And when we felt we really weren't sure what cars were making the most money over time, or perhaps there was a new manager brought on board, and we wanted to take a look at what worked and didn't work in the past, we typically look back at sales over about the past 6 months by segment. We sorted these sales, as I've done in this report, by markup. So the cars that I made the most on, or at least I was able to get a customer on, went to the top. So this is a sold report. And if we sold that car on the internet with that markup, we know we attracted a customer with that internet price. So we should be able to get a car like that again and be able to attract a customer as well, as long as we can buy the car right. So this helps us get an understanding of what year, make, model, trim, and even color generated the most margin opportunity in our inventory over the past several months. Now we can look at each segment. So in this example, I just combined, make this easier, the large SUV, luxury, and non-luxury segments. And we can see the winners at the top and the losers at the bottom. Real quickly, you can go by, and there's always a story, right? Someone may say, well, I remember we sold that 15 Chevy Suburban and we lost all that money, and this was the reason why. But you know your inventory, you know what you're selling, and it's a great way to go back and recap what worked with you by segment before we jump back in and buying, searching for those segments for additional cars at the auction. But at the very bottom, by averaging the metrics for each segment, it can kind of get an idea of a sweet spot for the segment. For example, like the summary shown here, this is a full-size truck summary. We can see that buying trucks with under 60,000 miles on the odometer that can be priced a few percent below market for just over $32,000 could be a good target to hunt at auction. Now here's the best practice, and I highly recommend this. Make sure you use what I call a stock number nomenclature, right? You know, maybe put the P in front of your stock number if you're not already doing that. This is extremely useful when you're doing this kind of an analysis, because then we can actually segregate and separate the auction purchases. So now we can get an idea of how well those auction purchases that we brought in and sold, and how well they're doing over a period of time. And that will help you see how successful you are in that, in the wholesale market. Now, if you're thinking, now that I've spent all this time and energy and I've cranked these spreadsheets and I look at market data and I've decided what cars I need to buy, wouldn't it be great if technology could match me as a buyer with the sellers of the cars I need? Here's a workflow that I stole recently from a successful and experienced online buyer. That's an online buyer. No shorts, no hot dogs for this guy. Strictly an online buyer for a few stores in his group. And you'll see he starts out with a number of saved searches. Look at all the different combinations. And these saved searches are all driven from his strategy, his stocking plan. What cars he knows he needs to be able to fill those holes, because he spent his time trying to identify the holes. He knows what sells, and he goes and builds saved searches to identify where those cars are in all the different auction platforms. So today, there is technology that will actually update these saved searches in real time. So you can click on this little blue box on this particular workflow in the screenshot and only see the fresh units that arrived on the wholesale market, not going back over vehicles you've already looked at and evaluated. So first, in his workflow, he looks for cars that have a buy it now price. He sorts those out separately, finds the ones that he could actually make money with. In some cases, it may be a very low gross opportunity, but these cars he knows are bread and butter cars. These are cars he can turn, and hopefully he finds a few that were at the wrong dealer at the wrong time in the wrong market, and he can buy them now. Now, since you're very rarely going to rip a buy it now unit, he does a full appraisal on these units in his inventory management system. And I love this trick he's shown here. He cuts and pastes the condition report from the auction listing into his appraisal notes. Now, how handy is that if he ends up acquiring this vehicle, buys it now, and it comes in for service? Service can reopen that appraisal and see exactly what that condition report was, what he was thinking when he estimated his reconditioning. It's a great transfer of communication there, right from it, without a whole lot of hand typing and a lot of work to do that. Some best practices on this part of the workflow allows you to only review the freshest inventory. With the Save Search criteria and this technology, you can refresh them throughout the day and jump on buy it now cars that are just listed to find some of those deals. So next, he sorts through his Save Searches for units to enter proxy bids. Now, for some people, that's a four-letter word. I get it. But this was the problem that I had when I didn't want to commit the time, chop the wood, and make the effort to buy cars. I know what you're thinking. You want me to enter 100 proxy bids to win 5 cars or less. Yep, that's what I'm recommending. The best guys do it, and they're very successful at it. And it's chopping wood, and the guys that are winning are doing proxy bids. There are just no shortcuts here, folks. And it's not just winning cars that comes out of this process. When you do win, it's because you won with a number that fits your profit strategy. Unlike a live sale, you're not tempted to step up a few extra bucks here, a few extra $100 here, so you can come back from the auction with something. You can expense that coffee and hot dog, right? Plus, in my opinion, and most importantly, this is why I could not buy cars worth crap, because I didn't have the patience to learn the wholesale market. And I certainly had no visibility to markets outside of that farthest auction that I was willing to jump on a wholesale piece and drive to. It's kind of like Match.com, right? By casting a wider net and proxy bidding across different auction platforms like Manheim, Odessa, Edge Pipeline, you're able to look at more cars, and that's going to turn around and get you more wins. All right, so we got a little survey question here, a little interaction here to see where everybody's at on this question. We're going to ask, how many cars do you buy on simulcast a month? And I believe you can go right on and interact with that, right? So they can give us an answer. Wow, that was fast. All right. So the number I got, it's still tabulating. It looks like about 20% of you are not buying any, and the rest of you are buying some level of cars. 30%, not any. Good. Oh, the nuns is starting to build because you're falling right into my trick here. Already up to 40% and growing. All right, so the point here is, as you continue to fill that out, if you're only doing proxy bids and you're only doing buy it now, you've got to hit all the options in buying cars. This is chopping wood, and you've got to take advantage of every opportunity. And simulcast can be a winner for you, but you've got to look at the technology that allows you to do this, because it's a fast and furious pace when you're in there on simulcast. Remember, about 45% of you. So I want you to really think about getting into the simulcast game. And we have technology available now that can help you immensely in this area. No longer is this our limiting factor. You have the ability now to be able to leverage new technology. It allows you to set up lane monitors to alert you when your cars that you're looking for are actually going to run. You can have multiple auctions and lanes open simultaneously while multitasking or chopping wood, right? Making price changes, merchandising, all the things you need to do every day. And you can still know when those cars you want to hit or you want to actually bid on are approaching the block. Check out this setting down in the lower right-hand corner of this slide. So today, this dealer wants to know when a particular year, make, model, mileage range, and a minimum CR grade actually hits the block. They're leaving their system open, and they're going to get sound alerts when that vehicle that fits that criteria starts coming down the lane. And it alerts them again if it's going for $500 or better under average MMR. You can imagine the efficiency of this approach and the time that this can save you. And honestly, as that car comes down the lane and it's providing you with all your book data and your guide information, it's helping you make fewer mistakes when you got to make that decision on the fly. So I hope you took away a few nuggets from our time today on how to approach your sourcing strategy this year. Remember, the state of the union for the used car market is expected to be very strong this year. But I'm telling you, the winners and the winners that I see out there today will be able to source the inventory necessary to keep pace, even when trades at the curb start to fall behind for you. You have to find a way to efficiently match your plan with the sellers that have the cars you can make money on. Take the opportunity to get ahead of the spring market. Leverage some technology to cast a wider net and get out of the handful of lanes or auctions you have limited your buying to in the past. So if Match.com can take millions of well-thought-out profiles and deliver over 10 million successful matches that created 1 million children, I think you can leverage similar technology to match your well-thought-out strategy to find you the cars that you'll make money on and keep that used car machine running on all cylinders in 2019. Or you can shortcut the profile and your strategy, and you can take the risk of a different result. So for full transparency today, I'm not ashamed that I pirated most of the best ideas in this presentation. So feel free to implement them with no guilt attached, as I have. I recommend them to you, and if you want any information afterwards, I really appreciate your time. But if I can help you in any way, whether you're a client of Cox Automotive or not, please reach out to me. And I think we'll switch over and see if we've got some questions.
Okay, yeah, we have got plenty of time for questions. The audience, don't be shy. Send them in. We've got. We should be able to get to as many as possible. Patrick, I guess we'll start out. I mean, do you have any tricks to find cars that are ideal for the subprime market across multiple auctions? Tell us a little bit more about that subsector, and what are some ways our audience should be navigating in that area?
Yeah, so a lot of buyers that I see, obviously will use NADA to book out the vehicle. This is kind of back to that technology advantage, and I'm going to, an shameless plug here for Stockwave, but our software actually, you can build in a business plan that actually automatically books the car out against NADA, and you can see if the car is back a book or not. Now, keep in mind, if that's doing that for you automatically, you can look at hundreds and hundreds of cars across all auction platforms as a first pass to be able to find the ones that you want to dig into. Because you can imagine that can be a pretty laborious task if you're just going through car by car trying to find the ones. Most people who are in the subprime business kind of have a gut of which cars book out, but it's really nice if you can let the technology and the software do that with speed for you. So I've seen probably the most successful dealers be able to go in, build a business plan around getting cars that are, we call it the back-a-book business plan, and being able to evaluate cars quickly across multiple platforms against NADA and be able to buy the cars that they need that really will be money makers in that subprime market.
All right. Colin wants to know if we want to see a full demo of this actual product, how do we do that?
Well, you could feel more than free to email me. I think my email should be up on the screen there, and you can contact me, and I'll be more than happy to get you a demo set up, or you can go to beauto.com and look for the Stockwave tab, and you'll be able to go ahead and register for a demo. And demos are free. They're done online. A typical demo can take as little as 20 minutes to just take you through the software, get you an idea of what Stockwave will do for you, and really no obligation, but you've got to look at it and consider it when you start to think about how do I get more efficient, how do I get back into the auction. And it was interesting. I love the responses. I didn't think it would be that high, quite honestly, with the simulcast portion, because there's a lot of people not buying in simulcast. Hugely efficient time saver for being able to buy cars. And there, like I said, look at this technology because it has an amazing added value component to be able to really get into the simulcast business without all the intimidation and chaos of being in there and doing it.
All right. Question from Barry. You brought up proxy bidding as a great way to work on multiple auctions at once. One of the issues I have being a Ford dealership is that when I need 4 to 5 Fusions, I do not want to end up with 9 or 10. Let's dig into that and detail for us a little more on how we proceed.
Yeah, and like I said, I think that's kind of that market knowledge that you get good at as you go. My first response to that would be, hey, don't bid so much. Till you get kind of your low water level of where you can get those vehicles at. If you're winning that many vehicles, I'll tell you, most guys that I talk to that are regular proxy bidders are really literally getting less than 5% are they winning on. So probably the reason that they're doing that is they are casting a very wide net. They're going over multiple auction platforms. As long as the transportation makes sense and all that can be calculated for you in terms of what your expense in the car is going to be when you actually appraise the vehicle, where do you care where it comes from, right? So all I want to do is buy the car right and be able to make money on it. So I think what happens is they take a very conservative approach with the intent that they know they're probably only going to win 3 to 5% of those proxy bids. If you're winning significantly more, obviously the way to eliminate that is to lower your bid prices. And that's really kind of a rhythm and a feel. But what I've heard is that once you get into that rhythm, you do that analysis, you start to kind of find where you can buy those cars at. And every once in a while, you're going to get a couple extra ones, but you should be buying those cars right. If your max bid price is based on a position that you can own the car and really make some money on it. And the software will help you do that. They'll help you calculate based on your max bid what's going to be left in margin, and that's where it will do a lot of that analysis, a lot of that work for you.
Okay, we got a couple different questions about regions here. What market area did we discuss today? I guess let's start with geography. Can you talk about some regional differences in what you see in various markets and states, or perhaps Canada? Talk some geography with us about variations in the auction practices that you see.
Well, it's interesting, the software that, Stockwave was actually designed, which is fairly unique, to get you off of an individual platform. So no longer are you saying, hey, I'm going to go into Manheim and I'm only going to look at 2 or 3 auctions that are, in my backyard. What the Stockwave platform does is it takes you across all the platforms that are on in our software, ADESA, Manheim, Edge Pipeline, smaller independent auctions that may be scattered to whatever geography you want, and you actually determine that geography. So if you say, hey, I'm willing to buy a car as much as 500 miles away if the transportation makes sense, you're going to be looking, and again, you're going to refine that criteria for the cars that you want to buy. That's part of the strategy. But when you go look for that particular car and you create that saved search, it's going to really cast a wider net, and it doesn't matter whether you're buying we call ourselves at Stockwave agnostic. We don't care if you're buying from Manheim, ADESA, Edge Pipeline. We want you to find the best car with the most margin, and that's where I think that dealers are starting to find success, because there are certain times in the year when I'm in Chicago, I can buy a car in Florida that I need, and that makes a whole lot of sense, right? And vice versa. And so when they're willing to kind of spread their wings a little bit and go with that approach, it really doesn't limit you to your backyard or to your market. That's the kind of thinking that we built the software around, to be able to get you outside of your wheelhouse and find some opportunities. As far as the market data that I shared, that's geographic specific. So if you're, I pulled that out of the spreadsheets I created and all that. That was right out of a couple of dealers. I think the dealer example that I used there might have actually been, I used to cover as a vAuto performance manager primarily the Midwest, but really I just went into their vAuto account. We picked looked at their sales and pulled that data right out of it. So that could be different depending on what market you're in, but as well as the market data, right? So if you don't have a good line on market data, we can help you with that. It's so critical to find out which segments are hot. Is it compact car? Is it intermediate car? Or is it compact SUV? What's going on in your market? And we actually pull that data, and that resides in our system. And if you need some assistance with that goes a long way at building a strategy. And we factor all that in when we work with you on your plan.
All right. Question from Michael. How much money do you forecast for after-sale costs, i.e. auction fees, transport, et cetera? Do you pay for post-sale inspections at the auction? How does this work?
It really varies by buyer. I'm seeing that if you are casting a wider net, most people are building in the expenses for deal shield and post-sale. They're putting all that in there. Now, we calculate your transportation based on so many cents per mile. All that can be built into your business plan, so it automatically calculates that all for you. But when you get set up in our software anyways, the performance consultant who comes with the software, who will meet with you on a regular basis over the phone and share a screen with you, they will go through a series of questions about how you like to buy and what you're trying to accomplish. Now, the great thing about those guys is they're experienced buyers that we've hired from the market, and they are able to even share best practices for guys that are having good success in other markets and buying cars. And then they get that business plan built out for you to be sure that you're capturing all those expenses. Because I get it. If you're shooting from the hip, on some of that, even reconditioning, right? If you're not dialed in on that, you could be buying some cars that you think you're going to make money on, and by the time they get there, that doesn't happen. So it's real important that we dial in all those fees and expenses so that when you're looking at a car and trying to make a decision, filter it out, in or out, based on your plan, that you really know that you can make some money and all fees are captured.
All right. Patrick, this is kind of an industry-wide question from me. I'm going to ask you, what do you see changing in this segment with the big boys, with all the big retailers getting into the used car business and expanding their used car businesses? There's a lot of people, and there's newcomers like Carvana and big buyers. How does the average used car auction buyer compete with some of these big operations that are out there, and how is it changing the market, do you think?
Well, it's interesting because I think the perception is that those folks buy cars, they have some secret sauce or some big machine that allows them to buy cars better than the next person. And what I went through today, this workflow, it's the same approach that they use. The difference is they're really doing their homework, and they're letting technology rule out the cars that they don't need and be able to get to the cars that they think they can make money on. So I guess the way I would answer that if a dealer would ask me, it's kind of like saying, hey, I think I need to be more competitive on the internet, and I think I should price my cars differently because, traditionally I just mark them up $5,000 and I put them out there and see what happens. Well, those days are gone, right? So if I'm going to start doing that, what do I need to be able to make that shift? Well, one, I need to see what cars are priced at, like mine, out of the market. Two, I need some automation because that's going to take a lot of time. I can't go open up cars.com and AutoTrader every day and look at my car and compare it to everything. I need some automation and some technology to help me streamline that so I can start putting cars on the money. It's the same thing that kind of revolutionized pricing and appraisal, I believe, needs to revolutionize the wholesale business. And that is, if you're a dealer that likes to go in 1 or 2 lanes a week, spend, a day or better buying cars in that lane, and one of these big, we called them earlier, right, the big boys, if you will, happens to be in that lane that day with their clipboard, and you come back with nothing, it's extremely frustrating. And I hear that story all the time. I think you got to get into that game with them, right? You got to use the technology, you got to go beyond, you got to look cross-platform, and you got to search and cast a wider net to do what they're doing. And there's several 100,000 vehicles on the wholesale market every day. So there's enough to go around. And the good news is this year it's going to be at an all-time peak based on the volumes we're seeing coming off. So that's an opportunity to find some deals, I think.
Yeah, and that kind of dovetails with this question from Andrew. Is there a best way to acquire cars from auction? When you're dealing with auction prices that are near retail, is that this is probably an ongoing concern of a lot of people in this kind of situation.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know this is not the silver bullet everybody was hoping for today, but what I'm finding when I talk to good buyers and good successful buyers, and hey, they buy some losers too, right? I mean, nobody's got this down perfectly, but they buy a lot fewer losers because they are really working the market and getting an idea of where things are. It's really hard, I think, today to kind of dip a toe in the water into the wholesale space. You've got to have some help. You've got to continue to refine your strategy every day. It's kind of wash, rinse, and repeat, right? So we do some proxy bidding, we buy some cars, we get those cars in, we look at how well they perform, and then whatever we learn from that, we go back in and we either make a change on what we're going to buy next time or what we're going to pay for them, or we say, hey, that worked, and we go with it until it doesn't work anymore. And this analysis that you do is hugely data-driven, and I get it. That's not really, our cup of tea sometimes because it takes time and effort. So my recommendation is, let somebody else do that heavy lifting for you. Get some software, get some technology that comes with someone that can help you performance manage that and consult. Let them, crank out that data. Let them get you on a call for 30 minutes and say, hey, let's go in and really look at what's working and what's not working for you, and do that analysis for you. And then you can go out and spend your time buying cars and searching for cars once you get that strategy and plan in place. But going out there without a strategy is where I see most people really get into trouble, and they pay too much for cars and they say, oh, the heck with it. That's just, I'm out.
So to use your Match.com comparison, when I'm setting up my strategy and setting up my parameters to do my buying, what are some of the deal breakers that I should be clicking on? Which boxes would be the best, would be recommended when I'm jumping into this market?
Well, a lot of it has to do with kind of your appetite, and that's where that questioning comes in when you first get set up, on any software. But it's a car guy or car gal conversation. It's not, let me show you how to push the buttons. We can give you some software, and you can go in there and start clicking on it, and we say, good luck with that. Figure it out. Or we can give you someone who actually buys cars every day and has bought cars, and that is their expertise. And we can customize that to where you're comfortable. So there are some dealers that say, hey, I don't want to even look at a car unless it's got more than a 3.5 CR score. Let's build that into your business plan. Let's filter out all the cars that are 3.5 CRs and below, right? If that's the way you want to be, and you don't have the you don't have the reconditioning process, your shop is backed up because you got too much customer pay. All the each thing is different by store. That's the beauty of being able to set up that plan, so you're not wasting your time looking at a bunch of cars that you would never buy. Some guys do not want to buy a car with bad Carfax. All right. Some guys say, oh, I don't mind a bad Carfax as long as it's a minor. I like to sell against that, if I can buy it right. But, it's a different plan for each guy, and that's the key is we got to set that up to where you're comfortable, and then once again, learn from that process and then adjust. Learn and adjust until you get it dialed in, and once you get it dialed in, I can if you want to email me, I'll give you plenty of guys that I talk to on a regular basis that are experienced buyers, and they're happy to share their results because they feel pretty doggone good about it. They put the time in, and now they're very good at the system, and they're great advocates for us. I appreciate them, believe me.
Yeah, and when you think about the results, I mean, another good question from Michael here is, what do you consider a good gross when all is said and done?
Yeah, that's where you got to get your expectations on right with the way the wholesale market has been. So the buyers that I'm talking to, and remember, you got to make your decision about your pack, right? So everybody else says, I got this pack, All right, well, we tell dealers all the time, they don't like it, but we say pack is profit. So in the wholesale market, you've got to include that pack as part of what your margin is going to be. You can't ignore that. So if you're telling me, hey, I want to make $1,500 on every car, that I when I go in to look at cars in auction, and oh, by the way, I got a $500 pack, so I want to only find cars I can make $2,000 on. You're going to really limit your opportunities, right? you're going to filter it down pretty tight, pretty quick. So we know this is a game of inches now. I mean, in terms of margins, with margin compression and such, you got guys, buying cars that they can turn quickly, but have a great F&I department that's making, 1,000 plus on the back end. They may be completely satisfied with an $800 or $900 front end, as long as it's a car maybe within their franchise that they represent. They get a service customer. They get, they got a great F&I department. That can be a great opportunity for them, and it's a car that turns and has a low market day supply. I'm not going to be greedy on that car. I need those bread and butter cars. Then I want to go out and find maybe some of those unique vehicles that just don't get traded in, and see if I can. That's where you really want to cast the big wide net, because there may be an area of country where more of those reside, and you do well with them when you get a few of them here and there, and go find those vehicles. That's a car, though, because you're taking a chance, right? That's a car that's maybe not something that you get or see all the time, but you really think it would do well. That may be a car that, you'd be very careful on paying too much for, because you're experimenting a little bit. So I want to leave myself plenty of room on that vehicle, and I want to hire gross when I buy it.
Interesting. We still have a little bit of time here for a couple last-minute questions if anyone wants to submit them. Patrick, can we get back to a little more, if you could, on local market data? Where do most dealers get their local market data to determine if their sales and inventory align with what is being sold in the market?
Yeah, I used to, when I was in retail, I used to get the DMV data, the registrations to be a stack of spreadsheets, and you could do it that way, but it's really tough to try to get some semblance of trending and charts. I know in vAuto, and again, I'm not hugely familiar with other inventory management systems, but in vAuto we have a provisioning module that actually gives you what we call a stocking optimizer. And when you click on that, it will actually show you by price band, by segment, what the used car market is doing. And you can set that distance as far away from your dealership you want. If you say, hey, I consider my used car market as a 100-mile radius or a 50-mile radius or 150-mile radius, you set that distance, and it will provide you with the registration data around your store by segment. So you can get an idea that, hey, I had no idea, but the compact car segment is really soft, and the intermediate car, because, fuel prices are lower, is going through the roof. And I've seen this in a lot of different markets and working with dealers. They see a shift that happens, and instead of buying Sentras, they should have been buying Altimas if I'm a Nissan dealer or whatever it is. That kind of data is really important to dig into, and we're a huge advocate of putting that strategy, and I showed you some spreadsheets earlier that really capture that information to direct you to what segments you need to buy in, and then we can help you decide what are the best cars to buy within those segments for your market.
Terrific. Terrific. Well, I guess that brings us to the end of this webinar. Thanks to today's audience for the great questions that we got. If you asked a question that we didn't get a chance to answer, Stockwave will follow up with you by email. If you learned something from this session, please tell your peers and your friends about it. The recording will be available in about an hour, and you'll find it at autonews.com/powertraining. When the webinar ends, a survey is going to pop up on your screen. Your feedback will help us even do these presentations even better. Thanks again to Patrick and Stockwave for bringing us this most excellent presentation, and to you for joining us. On behalf of everyone at Automotive News, have a great rest of your day.